Well, good morning to you from Menorca. Right now I am sitting in a park waiting for Jorge to come and do an interview. So Jorge is one half of the Royal Society. Ideally I would have liked to have both Jorge and Cristel here today in order to do this interview. However, she's completely packed out preparing for the Royal Society Festival, which will be in a few days time, but more on that later. So the interview today will be just with Jorge and not with Cristel. Unfortunately, I'll have to do a separate interview with her at another date. I think Jorge's over there, just walking around looking for me. So anyway, while the church bells are ringing, I'm just gonna say thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm gonna hand it over to Jorge, who is walking over there towards me. And yeah, I hope you like this interview.
So my name is Jorge Delgado Ureña. It's a tricky name for people who are non-Spanish speaking people. I'm the co-founder of the Royal Society together with Cristel. Professionally speaking, I started photography around 2007 or so, which was not a great moment to start because of the whole crisis thing and all that stuff. But I initially was a commercial photographer. We used to do fashion and all that, you know, portraits and things. But the heart was, the romantic sense of doing stories and reportage around the world. So slowly I transitioned from that to this, right? First working with newspapers and magazines in Spain. Then I started to get international commissions and assignments, and about 2016 is when, with Cristel, we founded the Royal Society, and I started to do like bigger commissions and stuff. And the last 10 years we have been mixing personal projects with the community, the workshops, exhibitions, the whole deal. It's a long story. I think I'm a very classic photographer. I don't do very fancy stuff because one of the things that I always wanted to do was, do these stories like National Geographic type idea, and the whole concept of those, those type of stories is to speak to everyone. So my photography, it will be described as that, as bodies of work, as something that it's meant to be for everyone, for my mom, for my sister, and for other photographers as well, but based on real events and stories rather than, single pictures and things like that. Photography works with something that's powerful, in my opinion, which is the memory, right? I think that also, I would say that photography is one of the few or the only medium of expression in which you have to be there to do it. But you can paint something from home, and it can be, based on true stories and things like that, or you can write even about, whatever it is from home. But photography forces you to be in that moment. So that means that you, as the author of it, are going to experience, the weather and the people and the not knowing what's going on, the different languages and the danger and the happiness and all those things. And I think that you can somehow imprint that in your work, right? And I like that, yeah. The memory aspect and the reality of it as well. First of all, I have to say that people tend to believe that I'm against, trying cameras and things like that. I'm not. I'm pro technology, if that makes sense, right? I think that it's great to have this romantic view of film and the old way of doing photography, but I think that the camera shouldn't be in the way, right? Therefore, newer stuff, there's always going to be interesting for the objective photography, which is to say something with it. I use Fuji cameras. I used to do Nikon back in the day when there were no mirrorless, but then I discovered the Fuji cameras, and I like them because they are small. People don't get worried about you being a photojournalist or anything like that. And I like how it looks and the quality. They're not the fastest or anything like that, but the discretion of them, they work well for me, and that's the reason. And I like these ones in particularly, the X Pro things, because of the optical viewfinder, which is one of those things that is kind of an old-fashioned stuff to see through it, but I like it. It saves battery, which I don't know if it's still a thing, but in mine it's important. And you see through. I never got used to the electronic viewfinder. I will need to get used to it, but for the moment I'm still working with this and I'm happy with. It's also a cool question because I think it's story driven. I would say that most of my work, that people can recognize would be with a 35 or equivalent. This is like a 23 in Fuji speaking, or 35. But depending on the type of story or the type of assignment, I would use also maybe a 50, or instead of a 35, a 50, together with a 24 for interiors and things like that, or also maybe with an 85 for portraits, depending on what I want to do. But the main bulk of of the things that it's kind of this signature type stuff that people like, and I do like as well. It tends to be with something like a 35. It's very flexible, and I like how it looks. I think it matters in a way that it's important that it doesn't get in the way, right? So I think that it's interesting to have something that you know how to use properly, that you know all ins and outs, and that's it, right? And depending on the type of job, I think that if you are going to do multimedia stuff and you need to do videos and pictures and stuff, it makes more sense to use something like a Sony with a zoom lens, right? Why do we need to stress ourselves with different kinds of stuff? And if you're going to do something like I do, it's interesting to go maybe with something smaller, where it's a little bit more discreet. But that's the main message, would be that it shouldn't be in the way, and we need to use our tools. So the purpose of photography is to say something, right? So the tool is just a tool, and you have to find the one that works for you, and that's it. That's my opinion. I like the question as well, because I think we all have that, the trigger thing. And I saw your video talking about them, and it's a really cool, way to refer to it. I think that it depends on what's the context. In my case, sometimes I have a plan, I have a story that I want to develop. Therefore, I'm going to be more focused on if what I want to photograph is going to be part of that story or not, right? So one of the reasons that I don't photograph a lot at home is because I'm not developing stories at home, maybe in my own town, right? That being said, the graphic triggers that, as authors, I think that everybody sees and says, oh, that's interesting, that looks nice. It tends to be, in my case, related to the location. I'm very interested in the relationship between the territory and the subjects, or the people that lives there. Therefore, the location is something that triggers a lot my interest, in combination with a specific type of light as well. I tend to like that type of, golden hour moment, which is very limiting, but I like it. And yeah, those two things. Yeah, I think that there's value in both. More artistic-driven people, they might be, more interested in the single pictures thing because it's more impactful and that kind of stuff. But in my case, I tend to prefer to develop, some kind of story. That means that with one picture, there's just no way, right? Even with a body of work of photography, it's hard to tell a story. So often I include more things like writing and stuff like that. But the point of my work is to, to tell a story. I've never been here. It's pretty cool.
That's really cool, huh?
Yeah. And
we'll go down there and then we'll just loop around again.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll go down
that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be the main reason of the bodies of work, is because I try to speak to everyone, and context matters in that sense to me. I think so. I think it's, I think that the writing part is very liberating in general, because I don't think that you need to, I happen to like it, and it's a discovery that is kind of recent. I started writing more like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I happen to like it, and I think it complements stories in a way that it's interesting to me, and you can go deeper in a subject and explain yourself in a way that, photography is limited. It's impossible to explain sounds and smells and stuff like that, and with writing you can do it, and you can use yourself as this channel to tell, a story through your own experience and the things that happen to you. But also, I think that writing, if you're going to be less story-driven, is still valuable, because you can, it helps you to think about your own experience somehow. Even if you're not going to share it with anyone, I think that for yourself, it makes the work more meaningful. Even if it's going to be, single pictures and stuff, putting words to an experience is always valuable and interesting. Look, this is in your honor.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it reinforces the idea. Lots of people, I think that they believe that when they do photography, they travel around and they do street photography, they are bothering people. I don't believe that. I think that you can be bothering person, in the sense that you can be too aggressive or something like that. But the concept of documenting life, whether it's going to be traveling or street photography or whatever it is that you are putting together something that, in my mind, will be meaningful in the future, is not annoying to people, right? But you kind of forget that, especially in the West. Then when you go to a place in which there is a problem, there is conflict, in the case of Ukraine, what reminds me is that someone going to a place to try to tell a story, it's meaningful and it's valuable. And people, when you listen to someone, they want to explain to you stuff, right? And I think that that's the main key of it, being aware that you taking an interest in someone else, whatever that might be, it can be meaningful for both of you, right? And I think that that's valuable, and we should explore it a little bit more, maybe, right? Having a chat with someone in the street, and maybe taking a portrait, that can be a very interesting exchange of experiences, right? Yeah. I think it's a good question, actually, because I think that lots of people, lots of photographers talk about this. Oh, you have to be able to work at home and in your own backyard and all that stuff. And I agree. I think that being competent and knowing how to put together a story or work anywhere, it's important. But you might not be interested in it, right? It happens that you might be interested in something else, in traveling somewhere else or whatever it is. I think that you have to try to follow your own interests. And if that means that you have to travel, but there is definitely stories and interesting stuff at home as well, right? And I think that both things are true. So I don't know. I think that both things are true, and it's not so easy, right? I would say though that if you are interested in traveling, and I think that there is a value in that idea, in traveling, going somewhere. It gives you life skills, traveling. I think that it should be important for everyone. And then if you find that going back home is even more interesting for you, then just go for it, right? But yeah. That's also a great question. I think that, in my opinion, a story, it's when the objective of you as the author, as the photographer, is to explain whatever it is in a classic way. This is what happened yesterday to someone else.
Okay.
Right? Is the act of explaining, something, and that can be something a little bit more esoteric or more abstract, a more artistic way. You can do different things, or be more classic, like me, for example, which I'm going to have a very classic type of approach. But the idea would be that you are not the important thing here, that you are just a channel in which you have these experiences and these things, and that's going to be for someone else. You're kind of in the middle, right?
Yeah. Like the messenger.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. I think it's a classic, and that's one of them. Especially if it's going to be like a commission or an assignment, it happens definitely, and it's funny because I was lucky to have Steve McCurry coming to Menorca, and we had this, we worked together for a week, and he was commissioned to do something for the festival, and I would ask him, after the shoot of the day, I would say, "Are you happy?" And he would say, "I'm not unhappy," right? And I think that it's the core of that question is to be okay that when sometimes it's just not exciting. If you are, competent with your work, I think, be aware that it's going to be okay, it's going to be good work. It might not be exciting for you as the author of it, for whatever reason, and that happens, and be okay with that, if that makes sense, right? So, oh shit. It's a stellar moment in which I break the camera. And yeah, it happens, and I think that when that's happening, I would say try something else. Try to, put your work in a book form, just for yourself, right? And that gives you ideas. One of the reasons that I push this idea of writing so much is because it happens the same thing, is that you put stuff together, in writing, and that your brain start working in a way that it's a little bit different, and you start to say, okay, it would be great to do this or that. It gives you new ideas. It's a conversation with yourself, with putting a book together, or designing, a package of pictures, and trying to think about the sequence, for example. Even if it's just for fun, it will give your brain going, and that's something that works for me always. Yeah, so in our kind of photography, I would say, because people do different kinds of stuff, it would be understand your gear and the technique, right? Understanding light, the basic forms, which is easy to say, but it's not so easy to do, really. And being able to translate into a picture something that you imagine that can happen, right? So being able to do that, I think it's important. Having an understanding of what will happen when people see your picture. Not all the photographers, because in between us, we're going to see things of the trade, right? But what happens when your friends or whoever sees your pictures? Having an understanding of that, I think, is interesting, because for those moments in which we were talking about the inspiration and this stuff, it forces you to think in a different way about how are you going to photograph. And in my opinion, this is very specific to me, the traveling skills, forcing yourself to be out of the comfort zone. I think it's very interesting because, again, it gives you the tools to react to moments and situations that are not. And traveling can be to go to another city. You don't need to go to another continent, right? You needing to wake up early and going somewhere and stay long hours, having to talk with people that you don't know, explaining yourself, all that stuff. It's tricky, but when you learn to do it, it becomes part of who you are, and I think it enriches a lot. So, yeah. I think that what I would do is to be less conservative, in the sense that, because I was just talking about that right now, about the, going to somewhere else and trying uncomfortable things. That's something that I think it took me a moment to do it. As I was saying, I started with this, the commercial stuff and all those things. I think that if you think that you can do it, go somewhere where things are happening and you just do it, right? And in my case, it took me a moment to realize that if you want to do cool stuff, you have to go to cool places, right? And someone told me this, if you want to have interesting stories, you have to be an interesting person. Therefore, you have to do interesting stuff, right? So yeah, just risk a bit, not danger, but just try stuff. Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, and the only thing that comes to mind, which is not a bad thing, is to do what you do, right? So you not only photograph, but also you show how you do it, where you go, the type of gear that you use, how you process, and all those things. I think is going to be basic, and it's something I've been talking with photographers with these longer careers, more with a classic approach, to magazines and things like that. And I tell them, you have to start to put yourself out there, in the way that you want to, but people need to understand that you are a real person that goes to real places and you have real experiences. I experienced these sounds, these smells, I got sick with the food, or the food was fantastic in this other place. I met this person and they told me this story, So you are not the story, but you are the channel to explain it. I think it's the most valuable thing, and using technologies, of course, writing about it and doing videos about it, sound, whatever it is, but showing that not only the story back of it, but the experience itself is also part of the story, if that makes sense, right? And it's going to be super important, because at the end, people, if I can expand on it, at the end, people are going to relate to a story because how you experience it, because they can relate to you. So if I explain to you a story about this guy that I met in Iraq, right? It's such a different context and such a different, situation that it's very hard to imagine, escaping Iran through the mountains of Iraq and becoming a guerrilla fighter, right? But if I explain it to you and I say, this is my impression of it, this is what I thought when I was going to interview whoever, then you can relate to me at least, right? And that's the value of experiencing stuff in the real life. Then people will trust your criteria and your point of view. They will trust you as someone honest, or whatever you want to translate to people. The Raw Society, it's a community of people that understand each other, in a sense that, so we started as a company doing workshops around the world for people that wanted to develop their skills with storytelling and photography. We would do workshops in places like Nepal or Cuba or places like that. So they would come for a week or 10 days to do that kind of thing. But then we realized that this language that we speak, this photography thing that is hard to explain to people that are non-photographers, really, right? It's kind of a lonely thing, right? Because we know what we're talking about, everybody watching, but when you explain to people, yeah, I travel around, I go around with my camera taking pictures of strangers, sometimes you get this look like, what are you talking about, right? Why you do that? And that's the society point, is to have this group of people, and now we are about 350 photographers in 35 different countries that understand the meaning of that, but they want to grow together, if that makes sense. And the whole thing evolved from these workshops to a community online. We started a magazine that we publish every year. We do online courses, we still do trips. And now, And of course, you can become a member, and you have, you know, in a platform that we have private only for members, you have talks and online workshops that are part of the membership and all kinds of cool stuff. And now that it's our 10th anniversary actually this year, we decided to go super crazy and to start a festival, a photography festival. And that's going to happen here in Menorca, where we live. It's the Raw Photo Fest, in which we're going to have 24 exhibitions from photographers like Steve McCurry, Martin Parr, but also people that is less known, upcoming photographers, and of course the pro members of the society as well, which that's why you are there. and it's going to be pretty awesome. We are now mounting the whole thing. It's looking fantastic. We have exhibitions outside in more regular places like galleries. We have them in private garages and houses, so it's pretty cool. And most of the photographers are coming as well. And it's going to be a celebration of storytelling in all, you know, its meaning. And it will be a moment to share stories, experiences, to explain yourself to people that might be interested in your work, and just to enjoy a very nice 4 days from the 7th to the 10th of May. And that's it.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this interview. First of all, a huge thank you to Jorge for saying yes to do this. I love making these videos because I get to learn so much from other photographers, and hopefully you do as well. So the festival starts in a few days' time, and I'm going to be there. There's going to be loads of photographers there. Hello, there's a dog. Ooh, there's a wall as well. And yeah, I mean, if you are either based in Spain or you have nothing to do this coming weekend and wish to meet other photographers and see what this festival is about, there are 2 different kinds of like entries, but I'll leave a link to everything down below so you can explore it yourself. And that is it. So I just want to say a huge thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.